Good morning, everyone. This is Brad Queck with Virtual IT. I've got Mike McQueen here with me. We're very excited to welcome you to our Managed Threat Detection and Response webinar. We have a few slides to share, and then we're going to turn it over to our partner in this solution to give you some details on how their solution works and how it makes you much more protected against cyber crime. Having said that, a couple of housekeeping things. There's a chat box that you can use to submit questions. If you do that, we'll be monitoring them. If it makes sense, we'll try to answer them during the presentation. If there are some that it makes more sense to keep to the end, we will do that. And this session is being recorded, so if you'd like to get a copy of the recording after the fact, we can absolutely make that available to you. So having said that, John, if you could hit the next slide. There's quite a bit of, obviously, with cybercrime in the news these days, and it's really reminds me of some things. It takes me back to the year 2000 when we first started doing technology support for small businesses. We were hosting email for most of our clients, and we didn't have any spam filters back then because you didn't need them. And then by about 2004, 2005, that spam stuff just went crazy, and we had to buy filters to put in to protect everybody. The same thing is happening here, only it's on a much worse scale. As you can see by these numbers, the whole cyber threat situation is increasing rapidly, and now actually cybercrime exceeds the global drug trade in terms of the amount of money that's taken. Could you hit the next slide, John? And so the threats here are significant. The stuff that's at risk is your client information, your personal employee information, a lot of information about your business that can be used to either steal your money or harm your reputation. And next one, please, John. And this is what can happen. It can actually, if you're not protected against it, take you out of business. That's how bad it's gotten. So having said all that, it's obviously time that we do something to protect ourselves better. And with that, I'm going to let Mike describe what we're doing to do that.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're really pushing right now is we're performing risk assessments for all of our clients. We're doing this on a client-by-client basis and making recommendations based on where you're currently sitting with your security setup. A number of things that we're looking at for that is whether or not you have cybersecurity insurance. We may make some recommendations on getting some equipment that's a little more up to date, has a few more security features. And then we're also making recommendations on just some settings changes, things that don't really cost you anything, but they still are helping protect you. But with all of that, there's still opportunities for people to click on the wrong link, to go to a web page that downloads a virus to your computer, things like that. And that's what today is really about, is protecting those endpoints. And that's where this managed threat detection and response comes into play. And so really, outside of all of those other settings, we're going to focus on that today. And that's where I'd like to turn this over to John so that he can kind of go into further detail with that.
Sure, and thank you guys so much for the setup there. And just as a formal introduction for everybody on the call today, my name is John Pierre-Felice, and I work with Sophos on our managed threat response team. Also, a little bit of backstory there. I am a heavy contributor to the incident response service that we offer called Rapid Response. Those two do go hand in hand, and I want to talk about how they play a very critical role in the way that we deliver our MTR service. I think everything that the virtual IT team has spoken about so far is really leading up to where I want to jump into, and that's what have we seen the shift. COVID really was a differentiator in the space from security, and at least in the world of pre-COVID, there was a lot of behavior that we saw. Number one was from a visibility perspective. There just wasn't a lot of information that we were able to gather correctly, mainly because most people just had a very standard on-network setup where, being able to identify threat activity, a lot of people had a tool that you would probably hear about in the world called EDR, Endpoint Detection and Response, but not a lot of people had the training and the skill set to be able to leverage it appropriately. And the increase in organizations that were getting hit, by cyber attacks, right before COVID and the 2019 time was almost 70%. Everybody was susceptible to these attacks, and a lot of people were feeling that pressure. And the one picture that I always like to show is really the vulnerability spike that we've seen since probably 2017, this is all correlated back to that endpoint detection and response tool that I was speaking of. So for everyone who doesn't know, EDR is a threat hunting tool. And probably around the 2016, 2017 time, we saw a lot of industries offering the capabilities for skilled security teams to be able to take on an additional tool to become threat hunters. And in that same light, a lot of the cyber terrorists and the threat actors that were out there started to feel more pressure because they understood that there were people that had the ability to identify threat activity a little bit better and act on it. So what did they do? They found new ways to attack systems. They were able to find new techniques, new tactics, and they were able to exploit combinations of those techniques in order to get around and essentially exploit those vulnerabilities. We saw an increase in people trying to use abnormal behavior as a means to infiltrate, networks and systems. And then what happened is when we introduced COVID into this experience, now we started to see just a huge wave. We had so many people that were basically shifting to a work from home model. So, what we were seeing across the government landscape, and even now, we're seeing, political implementation of, people understanding that the nation state of Russia is not acting on the cyber terrorists that are executing attacks inside of their own nation state. And we are taking a firm stance on that, at least from the government. And one of the things that we've really seen, at least as a whole, is people are still working from home. But that shift was almost 90% of businesses were shifting to a work from home remote model. People were taking devices out of the network and putting them on an unprotected public IP behind a basic router inside of their home. And most of them weren't VPNing in to their corporate network. They were, connecting to a Starbucks. They were connecting to just a local Wi-Fi in their house. And this just created a bevy of problems for IT administrators. I mean, not only did we have off-network users, but increase in cybercrime activity across those users. We saw a huge lack in visibility as well. So, machines that are offline and not connected to the network are a lot harder to pull, a lot harder to ask questions and do investigative research on. And just as a whole, being able to jump in and access those machines and respond to them, it wasn't there anymore. And, this showed a huge spike in a lot of tactics that were being used, not only ransomware, as we saw, around 2020, almost 50% of orgs were hit by ransomware in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of them were mitigated, but we're looking at almost 70% of those attacks were successful in nature. That's a huge spike in companies getting hit, not only by encryption, but then we start to deal with the concept of now we have ransomware payments that have to be distributed. And just looking at 2019 to 2020, it's almost triple of the average payment. And the main reason for this is pretty straightforward. Companies don't want their name tarnished. And I don't blame anybody out there. Nobody wants to have to publish and release information, not only in a public format, but worrying about data leakage, worrying about your brand, essentially having a campaign where it's, listen, your security and your brand is not as robust as it needs to be. You allowed for private customer data to be stolen. It's something that nobody ever wants to experience. And unfortunately, cyber insurance companies are facilitating ransomware negotiations. And in that same vein, when we give these cyber terrorists funding and money, it's only equipping them to do more damage later on. I can tell you guys very candidly, Sophos has a firm stance that we do not negotiate with any cyber terrorist or threat actor because we do not want to fund anything that they do in that space. That's part of our incident response model, is not only being able to not fund future endeavors by their teams, but at the same time with MTR being able to mitigate that behavior. And we'll dive into that a little bit more. But the big number that I want you guys to look at is the downtime. We're looking at almost 19 days on average where environments are out of production entirely. Now, obviously, most critical infrastructure gets spun up within that space, but as a whole, 19 days of not having normal day-to-day operations, That's huge. And I'm sure you guys, you can do the math on how much money could potentially be lost if you were out of production for 5 days, let alone up to 19 days on average. It's a very big number, and we have to take that into account. As we kind of move forward into the space of what are these major causes here, the biggest one is stolen credentials. It's just the one that we have to understand is out there. Everybody works from their cell phones. Everybody has email. Phishing attempts are through the roof, and understanding that a user can see an advertisement for free Netflix for 6 months and click that link and sign in with their O365 credentials and give them away in the blink of an eye. And those same credentials are potentially linked to that endpoint that user is accessing. And now that threat actor can jump in on a remote session and access a device with the credentials they just took from a simple phishing email. This happens every single day. And me being on the incident response team, we get calls all the time. And most of the root cause, and this 80% number is pretty accurate in that light, comes from a user clicking a link they shouldn't have and giving away credentials. It is a huge, huge problem in this space. And one of the things that we wanted to do is bring in not only a team with our MTR that could identify these stolen credentials and how they're being manipulated across these machines, but being able to conduct a full 24/7 human-led investigation across the estate. We did not want to just be an AI-driven or machine-driven SOC where we just funnel data into a machine and hope that it finds the bad stuff that's out there. We had to combine the best of both worlds. So we wanted to make sure that we use our analytics, specifically Intercept X, the agent that you already have on your systems right now. What we wanted to do is use that as a very powerful tool, because it's collecting data from 100 million plus machines across the globe, and it's sending it back to our Sophos labs, and then they inspect that information and send new signatures and patterns for the 400,000 plus new threats we find a day. We want to use that as a primary source for how we ingest and implement our solution. So Intercept X is going to be that first layer of protection. But then we jump into what are we doing after that fact? And what we wanted to bring to the table with MTR is a single agent that allows our SOC to access all of the threat hunting tools we need to identify bad behavior inside of your hosts, your endpoints, and your servers, and be able to respond to them in a timely manner. And speaking very candidly, when we talk about response, I think the important thing to understand is how can we respond? So you, first of all, will allow us to either partner or work with the virtual IT team in an authorized or collaborative state where we can now implement, full hands-on keyboard remediation on your behalf and partner with the virtual IT team to ensure that no stone goes unturned. What I mean by that very candidly is we have the ability to jump in and block files, block dangerous hashes, block websites and IP addresses that are being contacted. Applications, something as simple as an application like TeamViewer that could be used to give remote access to a machine. We can identify all of these and block them if they're being misused or abused. But I think the real power of our tool, something that not a lot of vendors that are out there in the world of a managed detection and response can offer, is that live terminal piece at the bottom. Because of the fact that we offer our own endpoint agent, which is Intercept X, we have the ability to turn that agent into a tool for response. And when we use that live terminal, we can now open up a remote shell. We're basically gaining remote access to those machines. We can jump in and instead of just blocking a file, we can delete it off the system entirely. Instead of just trying to block an application, we can go in and kill processes that are being misused by a threat actor or a cyber terrorist that's on your machines in real time. We can clean up that machine for you and partner with the virtual IT team to ensure that every step is being implemented appropriately. That's what we want to bring to the table. And on top of all that, I think one of the most important pieces to this puzzle is really, in the world of isolation, it's the incident response that we bring into the, to the whole picture. There are not a lot of MDR vendors that offer incident response, let alone I have yet to find one that actually includes it in the service offering. And I think the reason why we have been so successful with our MTR platform, and why I can openly and honestly say that there has not been one customer under our watch that has been hit with file or full disk level encryption, nobody's been impacted by ransomware, is because of the fact that we have incident responders on standby. As soon as we identify breach behavior in any way, shape, or form, we classify that as an active incident, and we immediately bring in a team that handles containment, triage, and neutralization of that threat in real time. Most incident response teams, like ours that we offer called Rapid Response, are designed for a post-breach scenario where the damage has already been done. Now we have to bring in a team to fix it. When you are on the MTR platform, you get incident response built into that service offering to act as essentially I like to classify it as pre-breach, but as soon as we identify any breach behavior, if there is a threat actor that is inside of your network and has their hands on a keyboard inside of your machine, that is a active incident to us, and we immediately jump in and fix that problem and work with the virtual IT team to make sure that everything has been accomplished successfully. It's just something that you will not find elsewhere on the market in the world of MDR, outside of you having to buy a retainer and spend a potentially large sum of money to have hours on standby. I love the fact that we include this, and I love the fact that we can jump in and manage this for you guys successfully. The metrics are just as important. Everything that I've been talking about in the world of us being able to partner with the virtual IT team, be hands-on keyboard, respond to threats, action everything. If we're not doing it in a timely fashion, it's not going to benefit anyone. And if you look at these numbers, 2 minutes to detect, 20 minutes to respond, and then on average 60 minutes for a resolution time, this is huge in this space. Being able to know that if something happens at 2 a.m. because everybody in Russia is wide awake and attempting to now let you know that they are trying to take data, or they're trying to set some cobalt beacons to call back some payloads to be delivered to your machines, we can identify that behavior. And by 3 a.m., we should have it completely resolved, cleaned up, and then we can work with the virtual IT team to be able to let them know what we saw, what we did, and how we can partner together to improve your security posture and prevent that behavior from occurring again in the future. That is what we want to do. Because if you look at that number at the top where it says dwell time is traditionally 200 days, that is very accurate. I mean, most of these lay on the land techniques that we see, where people, they get a credential and then they sit dormant and they don't let you know they're there for sometimes 200 plus days. And then finally, when they realize that they are not being noticed, they start the process of trying to farm data and trying to get as much potential information off of your machines before they let you know it's time to pay up. And the fact that we can identify this behavior ahead of time, jump in and respond to it in a timely fashion, and then make sure that we work with the IT team to prevent the behavior from happening again, it's exactly what we wanted to bring to the table. What I want to at least highlight here really quickly is how we do this. And I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but I think it's important for you guys to kind of see what we are operating in the back end on how we deliver this platform. So if you look at the top right, that Intercept X piece, that's the agent that you already have running. And all of those, AV events that we identify, and any exploit or ransomware-like behavior, even simple things. Maybe you have applications that are on your block list. Pretty much if anything is violated within this list, and there's a detection, we're going to send this over to the SOC. The SOC is going to know about any of these events that are triggered across your estate. But then what we also have to do is that XDR tool, or what we call endpoint detection and response, what it's doing is it's actually collecting data automatically on your behalf. So anytime that you sign up with MTR, we collect the data for you automatically and we send it over to the SOC. So that way we can take these two data streams and stitch them together as fast as humanly possible. The main reason why we do it this way is because we don't want to act in the way where you just send a bunch of logs to somebody and hope that they can filter through all the hay and find the needles. That's not an effective way to manage threats, not in this landscape. There's too much dwell time when you have to filter through unnecessary logs to hopefully find the true bad behavior. So for us, all the data that you see on the left-hand side, we collect it strategically for the purpose of knowing that anytime there's a file that gets changed, anytime a user signs in, anytime a service is running or a process is running, a program's installed, the list goes on and on. We're collecting exact and valuable data. We're storing it for 90 days historically, and we're refreshing it every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, every 30 minutes, depending on the type of query that we run. So that way, as soon as a detection comes in, we don't have to ask your machines what's going on. We already know. And at that point, we just have to parse through all the data and correlate it and make sure it's a false positive or if it's a legitimate malicious behavior that we have to action. It's a different approach. Most people act in the way of, if you know what a SIM is, it's basically just a log ingestion tool. We did not want to take that approach. We wanted to build our own SIM, if you will, where we're collecting only the information we need to help protect you guys. And in that same space, we started to add some connectors, these little branches at the bottom right here, that allow us to gather network information with our firewall to act as a sensor, public cloud information to gather AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud information. And then even coming very soon, we're going to have a connector for our O365. So that way we can gather network, cloud, and email telemetry, along with having all of the endpoint and server information that we need. We are in essence building our own log collection tool, but we're still doing it in the manner where it has to be done effectively. We do not want to just ingest 1 million logs from multiple locations because we can. We want to collect the critical information to help keep you safe. The last thing that I really want to kind of address is going back to this slide here. We talked about the response modes, but I think just overall, what are you getting with this platform? So we talked about the enhanced telemetry with those connectors. We talked about the incident response and you actually having a dedicated lead. Anytime that there is an active incident, we're going to assign one point of contact to manage that from start to finish. So you get that incident response built in and you have one person that you can talk to rather than having to bounce around. You have all the ability to have these proactive posture improvements where if our team sees any gaps while they're doing a hunt, we're going to tell the virtual IT team. Maybe we see a user that opened up an RDP session and never closed it, and it's just sitting there waiting for a threat actor to take advantage of. We can see that and let your team know, so that way, the virtual IT team can partner with you guys and make sure we close that remote session before it's abused. We have the ability to run not only lead-driven threat hunts for the things that Intercept X has seen, but we also bring to the table the leadless threat hunts, which are critical. This is basically, we have a team of threat hunters in our SOC, and their sole purpose is to not stare at a security console and make sure all of those detections go actioned. Their purpose is to scour the internet, the dark web, and look for brand new and emerging threat activity that nobody has ever seen before. And as soon as we find it, we look for it on your systems. And if we see anything that is reminiscent of that attack behavior, we jump in and we start the process of cleanup as soon as we identify it. It is a really good way for us to be more proactive in our threat hunting rather than reactive, where we see detections come in and we have to act on them. This is the next level of not just doing a stack counting model where this is good behavior, these are the weird abnormal behaviors, let's address those. We want to look at everything. And the leadless threat hunts, having a team of hunters that are looking for the unknown and querying your systems as soon as they find them, it just takes this to the next level. And I love the fact that we offer the best of both worlds there. Everything that you're seeing on the screen is included in the MTR solution, and we wanted to make sure that we had a very well-rounded service at that, so we can check all of those boxes off. I think the last piece that I want to cover for you guys before we kind of break away is really going to be, talking about what we have seen out in the wild before and how we've dealt with it. I wanted to pull in this specific use case because I think it's really important to talk about, ransomware and being able to identify behavior is such a important piece of what we do at MTR. And I love this scenario so much because what had happened here is we actually had a customer who requested a threat hunt. They said that they had another business in the industry that was impacted by a threat, and they asked us to do an investigation, which we conducted. And we actually did not find any information during that initial detection. But when we did go through and do that investigation, we saw some tertiary behavior, something that was a little bit abnormal. It was a PowerShell script, I believe it was the PowerShell Empire tool. We saw this running on the systems. It ended us leading down this massive rabbit hole where we identified that there was this major trick bot inside of the estate that was trying to run unnoticed in the backend. So it was really one of those unique instances that I love to highlight because this is the behavior that we always want to encourage with our customers. If there is anything that you want us to look for, please request any abnormal behavior because it gives us the ability to start an investigation and potentially find something that may not have been noticed yet until that new indicator was found or until a process was executed and it let us know that it was happening. This is what I love about the platform is we don't shy away from being a partner, and we will be a heavy partner. We already have been with the virtual IT team. They always are going to work with us and send us information and request us to conduct threat hunts if they see abnormal behavior. And this helps us identify all of these pieces and help keep you safe. And I really do love this use case because it started off with an initial threat hunt and it led us to something completely different. One of the major trick bots that were identified, we were able to see it just from an ad hoc threat hunt that wasn't even supposed to find it in the first place. So it's really cool to see it kind of come into fruition and see our team not just stop at, hey, you requested a threat hunt for this particular piece. We didn't see it, that's it. No, we went down that rabbit hole and our team was willing to go all the way until we found, something that we weren't even looking for. So really quickly for myself, guys, I just want to make sure, are there any questions, at least for the virtual IT team? Did anything come in, any questions, or do we want to open this up? Please ask if you have anything, but Brad, anything that you want to address on the information we've covered today while we wait for some questions if they're there?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't see any in the chat box yet, John, but while we're waiting for that, I do want to add, first of all, appreciate you taking the time to share this very important and compelling information with us and with the team. And I hope it illustrates to everybody why we chose this partner. And also, we're sleeping a lot better at night because we put this solution on all of our internal systems and our hosting systems that we use to take care of clients. We ourselves are probably a bigger target than a lot of our clients just because these hackers see the opportunity that if they can get to us, they can perhaps leverage a way to get to all of our clients and get a bigger payoff. So again, we've deployed this ourselves and we sleep a lot better at night. The last thing I'd like to say is that we are also in the process of preparing complete security improvement recommendations that are specific to each client. We have probably at this stage presented to a number of you. Some of you we have not reached yet, but we will reach everyone before the end of August with those recommendations. And then in the meantime, and then the last slide, John, if you would, if you have any questions or needs in the near term, you can reach out to us. Mike McQueen is our Senior Solutions Engineer and also heads up all of our cybersecurity efforts. Also, if you have any questions or you receive any questionnaires from your cybersecurity insurance company that's asking a lot of questions about how you're configured, Mike is happy to complete the technical side of those for you. It's at no charge. Just submit them in and he'll get them marked up and sent back. So with that, that is what we have today. I don't see any questions there, so I think we will bring this meeting to a close. John, thank you very much. Appreciate your time, and I appreciate everyone's attendance. Have a great rest of the week.